This Morning, just about 22 minutes toward the top of the hour. On this Tuesday morning, I'm Sarah Colvin, and joining me live on the phone, I welcome our Cape and Islands State Senator, Dan Wolf. Dan, good morning.
Good morning, Sarah. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
That was a short summer we had, but it's nice to see the rain.
I know. I fear we're going to have one of those rainy Junes again, but we have had some really nice summer days, so that's good so far.
Yeah, the first day of June actually it was a great May, and then all of a sudden, so hopefully it'll just be a short-term thing. We'll see.
I hope so too. I hope so too. So let's talk a little bit, of course, and now that we are in that summer season, we've gone past Memorial Day. The traffic is starting to get congested here on the Cape, people coming over the bridges. And this is an idea that really has been talked about for many years and kind of being talked about a little bit more lately is the idea of creating a third bridge. And I think the idea on the table now is a public-private partnership to create that third bridge. So let's talk a little bit about what you're hearing and perhaps what your thoughts are on the pros and cons of a new piece of infrastructure.
First of all, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, and I'd love to really invite anybody who's listening to weigh in on it. It's a topic that, depending on how you frame it, some people love the idea and some people hate it. And I think if you frame it in the context of this is aging infrastructure, those of us who are year-round residents know that we sit in traffic jams in the middle of winter trying to get off the Cape to get up to Boston or to get on the Cape sometimes because of all the maintenance that's required to keep these 80-year-old bridges up and going. So you frame it as, this is aging infrastructure. Part of the long-term plan has to be to replace them. Otherwise, it's just going to be more and more delays and maintenance, and the expense is going to go up. Then people get it, and they sort of say, okay, in the long term, we need new bridges. On the other extreme, if you frame it as, we need more growth and development to build the economy and grow Cape Cod, you immediately, I think, reach resistance, and legitimately so, because the rest of the Cape transportation infrastructure would not be able to handle a lot more. So it's a legitimate argument to say, wait a minute, it's 2 lanes on Route 3, it's 2 lanes on Route 6. Creating more of a crossing capacity isn't going to really solve the congestion problem. So, Sarah, however you frame this, you can really come out, I think, on either end of whether we should and whether we need it. So that's the dialogue that's going on. And then on top of that, the Patrick administration threw in the concept of what they call the P3, public-private partnership, and actually want us to look at having a private company build, maintain, and toll or collect revenue on a third bridge. And out of the box, I have to tell you, I'm very skeptical of that. As you know from prior conversations, the idea of selling public infrastructure to private companies makes a lot of nonsense, or is a bad idea for a lot of reasons. So I'm very skeptical going in that this should be a private project sold to a private developer. So that's sort of, I think, how it's framed, and we really are in the listening mode. I really want to hear from people on all sides of it. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'd be interested to hear what our viewers think as well. And I think that, you mentioned the age of the bridges, both the Bourne and the Sagamore, and certainly, we're looking at infrastructure that was built in the 1930s. Definitely could use an upgrade, and certainly seeing all the delays that we have had because of the maintenance on the bridges has certainly been a draw. But we also mentioned that if we are going to create a new infrastructure, we do have to look at what the capacity of the Cape is. And so, our roadways are already congested, and it's kind of like, I think, opening up a dam into a small river and saying, okay, here's all this water, here's all this traffic, where's it going to go?
And I will say, representing the Cape, I am certainly not in favor of doing this to create more capacity to get more cars onto Cape Cod. I mean, I'll be very upfront about that. So you're exactly right. It doesn't make sense to open the spigot wider when we can't handle the flow as it is. So I think you're right on with that.
Right, and I think that if we're looking at a bridge that potentially has a toll, certainly, it's great if we're going to have tourists come over the bridge or visitors come over the bridge, but I know that there's a lot of people, yourself included, who regularly travel over the bridge for work, and whether it's people going from the Cape to off Cape or people going from off Cape to the Cape, whether for small, short pleasure trips or even for work, that could be a burden for folks as well.
Well, it's more, we're becoming more and more of a society that the mentality is that those who use something are the only ones who should pay for it. And, just to use those bridges as an example, the amount of money that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts benefits from because of the tourist dollars, tax revenues that are generated down here on the Cape would speak for even people in Western Mass who are the recipients of that through local aid and Chapter 70 money, should support Cape Cod being an economic engine. So, I mean, there's an argument to be made that it isn't just the people crossing the bridges that should actually be helping to support them financially. And again, I think we're really myopic when we look at things like simple user fees to pay for things, because there's a huge greater good involved. If I had a magic wand, I would have this paid for out of a transportation bond, bonded for 30 or 40 years, because that'll be the lifetime of it, and not have any tolls on it. I don't like the idea of that, and I think in general user fees they can sound attractive at the onset, but really don't get to the main point of doing a lot of these projects. So, I would do it as a public project. I would bond it. You could bond something at between 3% and 4% right now. I would bid it out. All the work will be done by private companies. This isn't a question of hiring construction crews that are employees of the Commonwealth. It's a question of having a bid process where private companies would bid for the work. It would create a lot of jobs, and we'd end up with better infrastructure. But I don't like the idea of going down the road of a public-private, so-called public-private partnership where a private investor-owned business benefits from public infrastructure and we lose control over it. Sarah, if the life of this is a 40-year life, look at the number of corporations, private companies, that come and go through bankruptcies, restructuring, get sold. We have no control over that once it's in the private sector. And public projects like this, I mean, we know the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is going to be around in 40 years. So projects like this, I think, legitimately and realistically belong in the public domain. And again, the work being done by private companies, and it will be an economic stimulus, but we maintain control over it. We also get it done cheaper, because the bonding rate, as I said, at this point would be 3 or 4%, as opposed to private investors, which would look for a much higher return on that investment.
Well, and looking at the way the bridges are now, obviously, I think traffic is a way of life, and people understand that there are going to be some delays coming on and off Cape, and I almost would think that for some that's part of the adventure of coming to Cape Cod. From a travel and tourism perspective, do you feel that there are concerns that people may not be opting to come to Cape Cod because of having to deal with that bridge traffic?
To some degree, yeah, but this is the old Yogi Berra thing. Nobody's going in there anymore. It's too crowded. I mean, if people were not coming to Cape Cod because of the bridges, there wouldn't be any congestion at the bridges. So clearly, yes. I mean, you hear a lot of complaints off Cape that, I had to sit on that Sunday afternoon getting off the Cape traffic jam. By the way, it is much more of a problem getting off the Cape now than on. There's no question about that. But as far as the bridges, Sarah, I am concerned legitimately about safety. You do hear accidents on both the Bourne and the Sagamore. The lanes are much narrower than modern design standards would be to guarantee safety on those bridges. So I think they ought to be upgraded relative to the safety issues as well. That being said, there are legitimate issues with the traffic jams that people sit in, but those are pretty rare. When you look at those bridges, they're sitting there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you plan your trip accordingly, and most people who live here and are savvy about the traffic can do that. You can't always, but you can usually do it. You can avoid a lot of the peak times and the delays. And even if we build new bridges, there are going to be peak times where there are delays. So there are a lot of reasons. I think this is a healthy dialogue that's going on. And certainly no decisions, I think, have been made. There are those who see the Department of MassDOT, the Department of Transportation, moving ahead, fast on this. But I don't think the decisions are going to be made fast. I certainly hope not, anyway.
Indeed, and as you mentioned at the beginning of our talk, we really are in that kind of discussion, information gathering stage. So I guess what's next in the process? Certainly, we're a long way off from making a decision on this project. But in terms of the information gathering, are there any events that are going to be taking place in the next few months, or is it just a time for the residents, stakeholders, and legislators like yourselves to kind of put an ear out there and say this is what people want and this is what we're thinking?
The public discourse should continue, and that's everything from letters to the newspapers, which we certainly read, and I think there's some great input, and I'm learning a lot through that. We will be holding more public hearings. MassDOT will be holding more public hearings as well. And, this is a really healthy dialogue. And again, information gathering is the mode that we're in now. And I love getting the input from you, from others who are thinking a lot about it, from the Chamber of Commerce, Association to Preserve Cape Cod Commission. There are a lot of stakeholders that really have a lot to benefit or a lot to lose if we don't get this right. So, or if we do get it right. So that's the mode we're in. Nothing is going to happen really fast. I do say again, from my own perspective, I think it would be a disaster to do this as a private project, and I just have to see more justification. For those who are interested in learning more, if you just go on the internet and do a search for public-private partnerships, transportation public-private partnerships, look at the outcome of some of these projects in places like Ohio and around the D.C. area and in Florida. The results are mixed. I mean, there are some cases where it seems to be working, but there are also some cases where there have been huge cost overruns, as I said earlier, where companies have actually gone bankrupt and sort of turned the thing back to the state. And I just think we really have to be careful. The Massachusetts is going to be here for a long time, and depending on who the company is, if we go on a public-private partnership, that path could be wrought with peril. So let's keep the dialogue going.
Absolutely. Well, Senator Wolf, I appreciate so much you joining us here on Barnstable This Morning. A great discussion today, and I look forward to the next. We'll talk with you again in a couple of weeks. Have a great day.
Thanks, Sarah. Take care.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye. Cape and Island State Senator Dan Wolf joining us here on Barnstable This Morning. I think we're going to post that question. What do you think about a third bridge? You can check that out on our Facebook page a little later on today. Just go to facebook.com and look for Barnstable This Morning. Going to talk with our assistant director.